To understand Robert W. Chambers's The King in Yellow, you have to understand the idea of an infectious idea. The book isn't a single, continuous novel, but rather a collection of stories that feel like they are being infected by the same fever. There is a recurring motif throughout the text, a forbidden, surrealist play also titled The King in Yellow. The legend within the book is that if you read this play, you cannot unread it. It acts as a crack in the door of reality, allowing something vast, ancient, and deeply wrong to seep into your mind. The stories move through different phases. They start with a sense of cosmic dread and psychological horror, then transition into the romantic, often decadent social circles of Bohemian Paris, and finally dissolve into the chaos of war. But whether the characters are facing a literal monster, or just their own crumbling sanity, the feeling remains the same. The world they thought they knew is a mask, and that mask is slipping. In the earlier, more surreal parts of the collection, we see this madness take hold of individuals through obsession. One of the most striking threads involves a man named Hildred Castaigne. Hildred is a man living in a prosperous, somewhat sterile version of the United States, but he is recovering from a head injury that has left his mind vulnerable. He becomes obsessed with the forbidden play, and as he reads, the boundaries between his life and the mythic decaying city of Carcosa begin to vanish. Hildred doesn't just read about Carcosa, he begins to believe he belongs to it. He develops a terrifying sense of divine right, convinced that he is not just a man, but a cosmic ruler. This isn't a quiet madness. It is a violent, grand delusion. He begins to see the people around him, even his own family, as obstacles to his rightful throne. In a descent into total murderous mania, he kills those he perceives as enemies to his empire, including his cousin and a man named Mr. Wilde. By the time he is institutionalized, Hildred has completely shed his humanity. He ends his journey with a prophetic scream, fully convinced that the King in Yellow has arrived to claim his kingdom. While Hildred is losing himself to cosmic delusions, other stories in the collection explore a different kind of transformation, the intersection of art and death. We meet Boris Yvain, a sculptor who has stumbled upon a terrifying scientific discovery. He has found a chemical solution that can instantly petrify living matter, turning it into perfect, lifelike marble. It is the ultimate achievement for an artist, the ability to freeze life itself, but it is also a curse. The tragedy of Boris's life is tied to this pursuit of perfection. He is caught in a complicated, painful love triangle with a woman named Genevieve and a man named Alec. The tension of their relationships, combined with the unnatural nature of his work, leads to a spiral of despair. Genevieve eventually takes her own life, drowning in a rose-colored bath, a scene that feels more like a dream than a reality. Unable to cope with the loss and the weight of his own discovery, Boris eventually takes his own life. Years later, the narrative returns to a narrator who was a friend of this social circle. He returns to Paris, but the city he finds is no longer the one he remembers. The world has become unstable. He experiences a total breakdown of reality, where statues seem to move and breathe. He finds Genevieve's body seemingly resurrected in a room made of marble, only to be pursued through the streets by a terrifying supernatural entity, a man with an iron-like limb. This sequence pushes us away from the human drama and straight into the cosmic horror, where the narrator is lost in a vision of black stars and the presence of the king. As the collection shifts, the tone changes from this heavy, supernatural dread to the more grounded, though still highly stylized, world of Bohemian Paris. Here, the horror is often found in the social masks people wear to navigate their desires and reputations. We follow an American artist named Hastings, a naive young man who enters this sophisticated, cynical art scene. He becomes infatuated with Valentine Tissot, a woman who is highly aware of her reputation and the social cost of her passions. Valentine is a character defined by the tension between what she shows the world and what she truly feels. She asks her friend Clifford to protect her reputation so that Hastings will never discover her true nature. Their romance is frantic and desperate, culminating in a high-speed train ride where Valentine finally breaks a sacred vow just to be with him. It is a moment of reckless surrender, an attempt to outrun the consequences of their social standing. This theme of hiding one's true self is echoed in the character of Clifford, a charismatic and often inconstant artist. Clifford spends much of his time navigating fleeting infatuations, but he finds himself driven by a much darker, more serious obsession with a woman named Rue Beret. Rue is an enigmatic, untouchable figure of the Latin Quarter. In one of the most dreamlike sequences of the book, Clifford, in a state of drunken hallucination, climbs to Rue's balcony. They share a moment of profound, heavy silence, a connection that is felt deeply but remains entirely unspoken. It is a moment that blurs the line between a genuine human connection and a shared hallucination. As the book reaches its final movements, the personal dramas of these artists and lovers are swallowed by the visceral chaos of war. During the siege of Paris, we follow Jack Trent and his friends as they struggle through the starvation and bombardment of the city. The external chaos of the Prussian siege acts as a mirror to the internal chaos the characters have been experiencing all along. The book ends with a sense of total dissolution. In the fog of war and the terror of the bombardment, Jack Trent experiences a complete breakdown of his sense of reality. He finds himself joining a spectral, ghostly military procession. It is impossible to tell if he is witnessing a literal supernatural event or if his mind has simply finally snapped under the weight of the carnage around him. The boundary between the psychological trauma of war and a descent into a literal, cosmic nightmare has completely evaporated. When we look back at the whole work, we can see that The King in Yellow is working on several levels at once. There is the literal interpretation, which is a story about cosmic entities and forbidden books that drive people mad. But there is also a deeply psychological interpretation. One of the most important themes is the mask. Throughout the stories, characters are constantly performing. They wear masks to hide their social status, their sexual desires, or their true intentions. In the Bohemian Paris sections, the mask is social. In the stories of Hildred or Boris, the mask is the very fabric of reality itself. The horror comes from the realization that the mask is all there is, or rather, that once the mask is removed, what lies beneath is something we aren't meant to see. This ties directly into the concept of the yellow sign. In the lore of the book, the yellow sign is a mark that attracts malevolent forces. Metaphorically, it feels like a symbol of spiritual or social infection. Once you have seen the truth, once you have seen the king, you are marked. You can no longer function in the normal, polite, structured world. You are part of something much larger and much more terrifying. We also see a recurring tension between art and life. Boris Yvain's chemical that turns life into marble is a perfect metaphor for this. Art is often an attempt to freeze a moment of beauty or emotion to make it permanent. But Chambers suggests that when we try to capture life too perfectly, we kill it. We turn the living, breathing world into something static, cold, and dead. This is seen in the petrification of the lily and in the way the characters' lives become increasingly frozen in their own obsessions. There is also the question of whether the horror is actually out there, or if it is entirely in here. The book never gives us a straight answer. Is Carcosa a real place in another dimension, or is it just a hallucination experienced by men who have lost their grip on reality? Is the King in Yellow a god, or is he a personification of the madness that comes with extreme isolation or trauma? By leaving this ambiguous, Chambers makes the book much more unsettling. If the horror is just in the character's head, it's a tragedy. But if the horror is real, then the entire world is a thin, fragile veil over an abyss. The transition from the romantic, beautiful scenes of Paris to the grim, chaotic siege of Paris suggests that the order of human society is just a temporary distraction from the chaos of the universe. Ultimately, The King in Yellow is a book about the instability of everything we take for granted. It suggests that our identities, our social rules, and even our perception of time and space are just temporary arrangements. Beneath the surface of a beautiful Parisian street or a prosperous American town, there is a vast, shifting and indifferent darkness waiting to be revealed. Whether that darkness is found in a forbidden book, a scientific discovery, or the madness of war, the result is the same. Once the veil is lifted, there is no going back.